So guys, we're a few weeks into this sermon series called Words to Live By. And each week in this series, we've been looking at just one word that can change your whole life. We started out by looking at the word no. None of us like to hear the word no, but if we don't learn to say no sometimes, eventually our lives get so full of burdens and obligations, there's no room left for God. So we all have to learn to say no sometimes. And then we looked at the word yes. And we saw how God has this great big yes in His heart for you. And you can say yes to God and yes to life. And that one word can change everything. And then we looked at a really big word. We looked at the word help. And we saw how God created us to live in dependence on Him and dependence on each other. We were created to need help, but our pride often gets in the way of asking for it. And then last week we looked at the word sorry. And we talked about how if this word is a stranger to your lips, then it's very unlikely that you're actually following Jesus. Well, this word we're going to look at today is a word that can bring you tremendous freedom. Like this one word can dramatically change your life for the better. But before I show you this word, let me just say this. You can live your life in one of two ways. You can live your life like this. Like you're holding on to something and you're squeezing it and you're clutching it and you don't want to let go. You can live like this, or you can live like this. See, this is an open hand before God. God, whatever comes my way, I will hold it loosely and I will share it freely and I will trust you fully. You can live like this, or you can live like this. And there's a word for living like this. It's the word we're going to look at today, and it's the word enough. I have enough, Lord. Whatever you've given me is enough. And so I can unclench my fists. And I don't have to be a taker. I can be a giver. I can be a sharer, because our God is the God of enough. You know, a lot of people go through life as takers. The truth is, I have a taker inside me. And you have a taker inside you. But I don't want to be a giver. I want to be a taker. I don't want to be a taker. I want to be a giver. I want to live my life with open hands. And that starts with saying enough. I have enough, God. I mean, there will always be things that I want. There will always be things that I dream of having. But the truth is, I don't need anything that I don't have. I have enough. And guys, we're supposed to be smart enough to recognize that. Like, as human beings, we're supposed to be smart enough to recognize that we have enough. Like, fish are not smart enough to recognize that. You have to be careful when you're feeding a fish, because they'll just keep eating until they die. Fish aren't smart enough to know when they've had enough, but we're supposed to be smart enough to know that. But strangely, we have trouble with this too. I mean, tell the truth. If you go out to eat at one of those buffets, you'll eat way more food than you usually would. Not because you're still hungry, not because you need more food, but just because we're not very good at knowing when to say enough. And this is especially true when it comes to our money and our possessions and our stuff. And when it comes to our money and our stuff, most of us go through life with clenched fists. this. But I hope you'll take a good look at yourself today, because you weren't meant for this, you were meant for this. And this starts with one simple word. It starts with enough. God, I have enough. And it's really sad, because we live in this country where God has given us so much, and yet studies show that most Americans give away less than 1% of their income. Millions of people who have so much, and yet we tend to give away so little. Do you know that only 3% of American Christians give at the level of tithe? If you know much about your Bibles, you know that God established this practice with Israel a long time ago called tithing. And tithing simply means that I give the first 10% of my income right back to God. Not because God is short of cash, but because giving God that 10% is a powerful expression of trust.
Amen.
You see, my instinct always tells me, if I give 10%, I'm not going to have enough. But our God is the God of enough. And God will always give you enough. And when you trust God like that, when you trust that God is always going to give you enough, it's easy to give 10% to His kingdom. Am I going to live like this, or am I going to live like this? You know, here's what happens to a lot of us. We look at whatever income and possessions we have. We look at the amount that we have, and then we look at the amount that we want. And there's always this gap between what we have and what we want. And so then we start thinking, well, I don't have enough right now, but if I only had that much, then I'd have enough. And so we work harder, and we work longer, and we work faster to get more. And then we get more, and you know what happens? We think, well, I don't have enough right now, but if I only had that much, then I'd have enough. And on it goes. I mean, people live their whole lives thinking, if I just had more money, a bigger house, a newer car. Man, I don't have it now, but one day I'll have enough. It turns out we're not really very good at knowing when enough is enough. Guys, I want to share a simple truth with you that I've learned in my life. And then we're going to open up our Bibles. But here's the simple truth I've learned. So I'm 55 years old, and I know that's not old, but I've been around for a while. And I've traveled around this world. I've met a lot of different people from a lot of different cultures, and I've discovered this is true no matter where I go. The people who live with clenched fists, people who are selfish, they are the most miserable people in the world. And people who live like this, people who are generous, they are the most joyful people in all the world. In other words, the most joyful people in all the world are people who know that they have enough. Well, we're going to meet a man today who discovered this one word, and it revolutionized his whole life. But this story we're going to read, it's not really about him. It's about you. It's about me. So let's meet this man and read his story. I'm going to be in Luke chapter 19 today. I'm starting in verse 1. And here's what it says there. Jesus entered Jericho and was passing through. A man was there by the name of Zacchaeus. He was a chief tax collector and was wealthy. He wanted to see who Jesus was, but being a short man, he could not because of the crowd. So he ran ahead and climbed a sycamore fig tree to see him, since Jesus was coming that way. When Jesus reached the spot, he looked up and said to him, "Zacchaeus, come down immediately. I must stay at your house today." So he came down at once and welcomed him gladly. All the people saw this and began to mutter, "He has gone to be the guest of a sinner?" But Zacchaeus stood up and said to the Lord, "Look, Lord, here and now I give half my possessions to the poor. And if I've cheated anybody out of anything, I'll pay back 4 times the amount." Jesus said to him, "Today salvation has come to this house, because this man too is the son of Abraham. For the Son of Man came to seek and to save what was lost." Amen. So let's take a closer look at this story and see what's going on here. First of all, started out, it said, Jesus entered Jericho and was passing through. A man was there by the name of Zacchaeus. He was a chief tax collector and was wealthy. So just from this verse, we already have some really important detail here. Like, Zacchaeus is all about money. Zacchaeus understands money. He's really good at money. You see, Israel was ruled over by Rome, and Rome demanded that every Israelite pay taxes, and so Rome hired Zacchaeus to collect those taxes. And that's how Zacchaeus got wealthy. Because he would take money from hard-working Israelite families, he'd keep some of that money for himself, and he'd give the rest to Rome. Well, as you can imagine, these tax collectors were not very well liked. In fact, tax collectors are the most hated people in all of Israel. But that's who Zacchaeus has chosen to be. That's his life. That's his game. He's all about the money. Show me the money. He's given up on relationships and friendships and fellowship because nobody likes him anyway. And for a long time, he was okay with that because he was rich. But now he's starting to think that there's something really important that he's been missing in his life. There's something that he longs for, something he hasn't had in a really long time. And so he becomes interested in this man, Jesus. He's heard some of the things Jesus has taught about, and he becomes interested in Jesus. And you wouldn't expect that from a tax collector. You wouldn't expect a tax collector to be interested in spiritual things, but this one is. He wanted to see who Jesus was, but being a short man, he could not because of the crowd. So he ran ahead and climbed a sycamore fig tree to see him, since Jesus was coming that way. A couple of important things to pay attention to here. First of all, notice that Zacchaeus ran ahead. Well, in ancient Israel, rich and powerful men never ran. That was undignified. And remember, they wore those long robes, right? It's really hard to run in a robe. Rich and powerful men never ran. Zacchaeus runs. That's how badly he wants to see Jesus. He's trying to get ahead of that crowd. So he runs to get ahead of the crowd. And then he climbs up in a tree. Well, in ancient Israel, rich and powerful men never climbed trees. Look, when you're wearing a robe, it's not a good idea to be climbing stuff. Even in our culture, you don't see a lot of rich and powerful men climbing trees. But Zacchaeus does. Because he really wants to see Jesus. And maybe he also climbs that tree because, remember, he's a tax collector. Nobody likes him. Up in that tree, he'll be hidden. Maybe nobody will see him up there. You know, nobody likes him. Nobody wants him to be part of the crowd. So instead, he's up in a tree. And we're told that he was a short man. Nobody likes to feel small. And maybe that's why he was so attracted to money. Because money kind of makes you feel big. Money makes you feel important. Money makes you feel like somebody. But now that feeling's kind of wearing off for Zacchaeus. And he's up in that tree, and then something really amazing happens. He's up in that tree because he doesn't want anybody to see him. You know, he's a tax collector. Nobody likes him. He thinks nobody will see him up there. Nobody's going to notice him up there. But then Jesus does something that nobody expects. When Jesus reached the spot, he looked up and said to him, "Zacchaeus, come down immediately. I must stay at your house today." Really, Jesus? Of all the houses you could stay at in Jericho, you're going to go stay with this guy? This tax collector who works for Rome? You're going to go stay at this guy's house? I mean, of all the deserving families, of all the faithful homes, of all the religious people you could go stay with, you're going to go stay with this guy?
Hallelujah.
Listen, church, here's the thing about Jesus. And this is wonderful news. No matter what you're going through in your life, I mean, maybe you're a train wreck. Maybe you've been through bankruptcy. Maybe you've cheated on your taxes, cheated on your spouse. Maybe you've stolen from your employer or been involved in drugs. Maybe you've gone to jail. Well, none of that is a barrier to Jesus coming to your house today. Amen. Amen. Jesus loves coming to any house that will welcome him. So Jesus is looking up and he's talking to Zacchaeus. And I'm thinking Zacchaeus really didn't want that attention on him. Right? He's trying to stay hidden for a reason. That crowd down there doesn't like him. They might hurt him. The last thing he wants to do is come down out of that tree and stand among that crowd. But he does. He comes down from that tree and he welcomes Jesus into his home. And nobody could have seen that coming. In fact, it says all the people saw this and began to mutter, "He has gone to be the guest of a sinner."
Hallelujah.
Clearly that crowd is not too happy about what Jesus is doing. But if you read through the Gospels, you'll discover that Jesus is always doing something that somebody's not too happy about. And so the people mutter about him. Well, the people were always muttering about Jesus. Somebody was always. The Pharisees muttered about Jesus. The Sadducees muttered about Jesus. His own family muttered about it. His own disciples muttered about it. Somebody was always muttering about Jesus. But this is the only time in all the Gospels we're told that all the people were muttering about him. Everybody was. That's because nobody likes a tax collector. And they can't believe that he's gone to be the guest of a tax collector. It's outrageous. So Jesus is now a guest in the home of Zacchaeus. And Zacchaeus is never going to be the same again.
Amen.
I wish the Bible told us everything Jesus said to Zacchaeus that day. It doesn't. But whatever Jesus told him, Zacchaeus started seeing the world in a way he had never seen it before. Maybe Jesus said something like, "Zacchaeus, your whole life has been about money. You love money. But has it gotten you where you hoped it would? You know, Zacchaeus, you used to walk everywhere you went. Then you got yourself a donkey, and that was cool for a while, but you got tired of it and had to upgrade to a camel. Now you got a whole fleet of camels. How many is enough? You know, you used to wear a simple robe like the rest of us. Then you went and got a fancy silk robe. You really like that, so you got another one. Now you got a whole closet full of silk robes. How many is enough? You used to live in a tent. Then you built yourself a house. Then you bought riverfront property on the Jordan River. Now you got the biggest house in town. How much is enough? And I imagine Jesus taught Zacchaeus that the rich life he's looking for could never be found in money and possessions, that it could only be found in God. Amen. And I imagine Jesus inviting Zacchaeus to follow him and to discover a life where just enough is all you need. So Zacchaeus has all these thoughts going around his head, and it's amazing because he's never thought anything like this before. And then suddenly he's speaking, and even as he's saying these words, he probably can't believe he's even saying them. But what he says is, "Look, Lord, here and now I give half my possessions to the poor. And if I've cheated anybody out of anything, I'll pay back 4 times the amount." We don't know if there was a Mrs. Zacchaeus, but if there was, she's probably getting a little alarmed right about now. Honey, maybe we should talk about this first. You know, the kids are wondering if they're still going to need a camel when they turn 16. But Zacchaeus is so captivated by the idea of a new life with Jesus, he just stands up and boldly declares, "I'm giving away half my stuff here and now. Because half my stuff with God is more than all my stuff without Him. So I'm going to make things right. I'm going to make amends to anybody I have hurt. I'm going to be a giver and not a taker." And then what happens next is probably the greatest thing that ever happened to this little bitty tax collector. Jesus said to him, "Today salvation has come to this house, because this man too is a son of Abraham." You know, if you were an Israelite, the greatest thing anybody could call you was a son of Abraham. But as a tax collector who worked for Rome, it's been a really long time since anybody called Zacchaeus a son of Abraham. They called him a son of something else. But they haven't called him a son of Abraham in a very long time. He can't believe that Jesus says that. Somehow those words are more valuable than all the money he's ever made. And Jesus says, "Today salvation has come to this house." You know, we tend to think of salvation as just getting into heaven when we die, but salvation is so much more than that. Salvation is about healing and deliverance right here, right now. For Zacchaeus, it means that that disease of more is finally healed. His heart is no longer poisoned by the need for more. It means he can stop being a taker and become a giver. It means that he can finally unclench his fists. Because salvation has come to his house. You know, I was thinking about this. I was thinking about when I got saved. When salvation came to my house, I didn't even have a house. I was homeless. Living in a homeless shelter. Sleeping on a broke down little cot. Everything I owned in the world I could put in a duffel bag. Well, my life is very different today. I own my own home, and my home is full of nice furniture and stuff. But here's my question for you. What do you think is the correlation between my having more stuff and having more happiness? You see, it turns out there isn't one. It turns out some of my happiest moments came when all I had was some clothes in a duffel bag, a broke down cot in a homeless shelter, and the newfound knowledge that salvation had come to my house. That Jesus had come to my house. There's this wonderful passage. God speaks through the prophet Isaiah. Listen to what God says through the prophet. He says, if you spend yourselves in behalf of the hungry and satisfy the needs of the oppressed, then your light will rise in the darkness, and your night will become like noonday. The Lord will guide you always. He will satisfy your needs in a sun-scorched land and will strengthen your frame. You will be like a well-watered garden, like a spring whose waters never fail. Now, look very carefully at what God says here. He says, if you spend yourselves, then He will satisfy all your needs.
Amen.
If you spend yourself, He will satisfy your needs. Now, you have to decide whether to believe that or not. But if you don't believe that, then you'll spend your whole life wanting more. If you don't believe that, you'll go through life like this. If you don't believe that, you'll go through life miserable. Well, Zacchaeus finally believed this. Zacchaeus finally came to believe what the psalmist said. The earth is the Lord's and everything in it.
Yeah.
The earth is the Lord's and everything in it. Guys, this is such a big thought. You know, I told you a moment ago that I own my own home now. Well, that's not really true. The truth is, it's God's house. He's just letting me live in it for a little while. You see, here's my truth. My truth is, I don't have money. I don't have a car. I don't have a job. And I don't have a house. But every day, God lets me use a little bit of His money. And He lets me drive His car and come to His job, and then He lets me live in His house. Because the earth is the Lord's and everything in it. And one day it's all going to go back to Him anyway.
Amen.
And in the meantime, this world works a whole lot better when you stop doing this and you start doing this. See, that's what Zacchaeus finally did. He finally let go of more and was content with enough. Content with enough. So here's my dream for us. Here's God's dream for us. That we be the church of this. That we be the church of the open hands. Because the earth is the Lord's and everything in it. And you have to decide whether you believe that or not. But God's dream for you is that you stop living like this and you start living like this. Amen. That you let go of more and you're content with enough. It's a great word and it's a great way to live. So we're going to close our service now, and I want to invite every one of you to come right up here and put a stake in the ground and say, here and now, Lord, I'm going to be a different person. I'll stop chasing more, and I'll be happy with enough. It's all yours anyway, Lord. So just help me give away what is yours. In Jesus' name I pray. Guys, I'm going to do that right now because I was really preaching to myself today. I have the disease of more in my heart, and I need to spend time regularly asking God to teach me that what I have is enough. So I'm going to put a stake in the ground right now and ask God to help me with this. And I just invite you to join me.